This is Dickens' country, North Kent in the southeast of England. A landscape of windy salt marshes that he describes in the opening chapter of Great Expectations as a dark, flat wilderness, with the low leaden line of the River Medway stretching out to the North Sea. Dickens walked the country lanes of North Kent as a man and a boy. He was familiar with its towns and villages and visited them in his imagination as a writer again and again. The churchyard at Cooling is on the edge of the marshes outside the town of Rochester. It is here that Pip, in Great Expectations, looks upon the graves of his parents and the 5 little stone lozenges, each about 1.5 feet long, where his brothers are buried. Here, among the headstones too, he meets the convict Magwitch for the first time. Not far from the church is the old forge house at Chalk. In Dickens' day, it was a working forge, and it's thought to have provided Dickens with the inspiration for the smithy where Pip lives with his uncle and aunt. Dickens knew and was fond of the old cathedral town of Rochester. In 1856, he bought a house in the village a few miles from the town, and Rochester's buildings and streets appear thinly disguised in a number of his stories. In his final novel, The Mystery of Edwin Drood, he calls the town Cloisterham and characterizes it as a sleepy backwater, a city lost to time. "So silent are the streets," he wrote, "that of a summer day the sun-browned tramps who pass along and stare quicken their limp a little, so that they may the sooner get beyond the confines of its oppressive respectability." Not a difficult feat, because Dickens' Rochester is little more than one narrow street, its High Street. Mr. Pickwick and his comrade stay at the Bull Hotel on the High Street in the Pickwick Papers, and in Great Expectations, Dickens describes it again, but rechristens it the Blue Boar. Pip is taken to the old town hall, the Guildhall, by his uncle Joe Gargery to be formally apprenticed as a blacksmith. To the young Pip, it is a queer place, with higher pews than a church and shining black portraits on the walls. And it was a house in Rochester that gave Dickens the inspiration for the Satis house of Great Expectations, where Pip meets Miss Havisham and falls in love with Estella. The house, Restoration House, seems to have exerted a lasting grip on Dickens' imagination. On his last visit to Rochester, a few days before he died, Dickens was observed leaning against the railings, gazing up at its windows.